And I was asked that, should I start over? Many years ago, more than I care to admit, I was sitting across the desk from my high school guidance counselor, and I was asked that dreaded question that many young people loathe. Andre, what do you want to do with your life? I was in grade 11 when I was asked this. I was in a band. We were going to be rock stars. I could care less about school. All I worried about were friends, girlfriends, and how I could get away with doing the absolute bare minimum without getting a letter sent home to my parents. And knowing that my mother is watching, she is nodding or frowning right now. Yet I was able to actually identify a career, niche as it was, that I might actually enjoy, inspired by the extracurriculars I was a part of. During my high school years, I was involved in what was called the praise team for weekly morning chapel services at my Christian high school, as well as being involved as a participant in the youth group at the church down the road. And that youth group was led by a young, incredibly personable youth pastor named Pastor Rick, who I quickly took a liking to. So when I was asked that question, what do you want to do with your life? My response was, well, I want to do for others what Pastor Rick did for me. To expand on that, I wanted to help young people. I wanted to go on McDonald's runs with youth and talk about their relationship problems, as if I had a clue. I wanted to encourage them through the process of Bible study and using the Christian faith as a means by which to build a foundation for these young folks' lives. I wanted to be a youth pastor. I dreamt of being dynamic and engaging as I gave powerful sermons in front of packed auditoriums, and of being a role model for young people to emulate. And for those who didn't grow up in evangelical church ministry, you might think, that's arrogant of you to admit. To which I say yes. Yet that was the fishbowl of the ministry that I was aspiring towards. The thing with this, though, was that my desire to be like Pastor Rick, it wasn't really rooted in any lived experience I had had. Up until I finally thought through what I wanted to do with my life was easy. Inspiring others in their faith was going to be a challenge because I was not really inspired in my own until my grade 12 year. Sparing the details which are unimportant to this sermon, in my grade 12 year I made mistakes which had significant short-term consequences for me. Yet in those mistakes, I grew to believe a number of things to be true. First was that despite what I did, God still loved me and forgave me. Second was that God would not give me more than I could handle. And third was that if God was for me, who was going to come against me? So family and faith got me through 8 of the most challenging months of my life, and I came out on the other side convinced that a personal and good God had seen me through from start to finish. This ignited my drive for attending Providence University College here in southern Manitoba. So I came here to study worship arts and youth leadership, as they called it, combining my love of music with my zeal for working with young people. And that's what I came to Manitoba to study back in 2012. And it was moving away from home which opened up a whole new frontier, freedom. I could come and go from my university campus and my parents wouldn't know what I was up to. Given my rock star aspirations in high school, I tortured my father with the thought of covering my body with tattoos. And now with my newfound freedom, who was going to stop me? It was time to get a tattoo. I had the perfect idea, a cross on my right arm. Being right-handed, this simple tattoo would exemplify my desire for doing everything for the glory of God. So I went and got my tattoo. I returned to campus with my permanent pledge of allegiance to Christianity affixed in plain sight. After this, I went through my studies, ultimately graduating with a double major in youth leadership and theological studies, and I landed my first gig as a youth pastor in 2015 at Willow Lake Baptist Church. While at that church, I loved everything I got to do. I worked closely with kids and families, the pastors and the board. I brought groups of youth across the country for large gatherings, similar to Canoodle, which just happened a few months ago, even though I was merely a kid myself. I missed my Opa's funeral because I convinced myself that I was doing the Lord's work and that work was equally important. I preached sermons rooted in exegetical study of the Bible, declaring that what I was saying was the Word of God. And I used that confidence at least once to exclude an LGBTQ individual from participation in the church, something I am still deeply ashamed about to this day. Yet, and this is the point of sharing my story with you this morning, we are each the accumulation of our life experiences. It's not a revolutionary statement, I know, but I want to lean into that this morning. I am who I am today because of my experiences in Christian churches, not in spite of them. And this is the story I want to tell and share with you for two reasons. The first is that this church, First UU, has been most welcoming in allowing me, a newcomer, to be involved and participate with you having very little idea of who I am and the formative experiences that led me here. And second, I want to encourage your own reflection. What are the formative moments that led you to where you are today? What are the moments that have led you to being here today as a participant and a member of First UU? And as you look around, do you know the formative experiences that have led those in the sanctuary and on Zoom to being here today? I hope my own reflections encourage your own reflections and inspire you to ask others of theirs. So my time at that first church I worked at, Willow Lake Baptist Church, it was exemplified by two things: love and grace. And being the recipient of something so profound, it changes you. And whether I believe the same things as that congregation anymore, I am no doubt impacted by the 5 years I spent as their youth pastor. Everything I did in those years as a youth pastor, with that cross on my wrist, I was doing it for the glory of God. And with love and grace, that congregation played a huge role in shaping a young, incredibly naive and green pastor in their midst. But then COVID struck, and this small church couldn't financially support the salaries of the pastors it had on staff. So I found a new church called Soul Sanctuary hiring for a children's pastor. I always enjoyed working with kids, so I jumped at the opportunity. And yet again, I led with my right hand. Everything I was doing, from holding a kid's hand to speaking with a microphone about Jesus dying on the cross to putting a Band-Aid on a kid's knee, I did it all from this place of doing things for the glory of God. And while at Soul Sanctuary, as I was moving away from my orthodox Christian beliefs, I developed a mantra of sorts that informed my work with the kids. And it was this: who I am, who we are, is more important than anything we can know or teach. Most certainly, this is not original to me. The simplicity of this statement nonetheless took on a profound meaning. I didn't care about teaching these kids about Jesus. Rather, I maintained that the kids in our care would learn about Jesus simply by the way we, the leaders, conducted ourselves. And that was the core truth I took away from my time at Soul Sanctuary, and something I still believe. I ultimately got fired from that church for a difference in beliefs around LGBTQ plus participation, myself believing and moving to believe in full inclusion and participation for LGBTQ individuals. And on my last Sunday at that church, October 31st of 2021, I encouraged the kids to dress up for Halloween. And this is one of my favorite memories from that time. One of the kids in the kids program, he used cardboard to make a faux computer screen that he wore as like a face mask. And on that computer screen, he drew a Zoom call, because that's what we were all doing at the time. So in this Zoom call artwork that he made, he included people who were important to him: teachers, classmates, and he included me. We spent some time together on Zoom, he and I, comparatively less than his school teachers. However, he still deemed it valuable to include me. I took this simple costume to be the payoff of that mantra that I shared earlier. I cared a lot about this young guy, and he knew it. Despite getting fired, one of the lowest points of my life, my time at Soul Sanctuary cemented that belief that who we are, that who I am, is far more important than anything I can teach or know. And years later, that belief remains fundamental to everything I do. Getting fired, it's destabilizing, for sure. But my move away from Christianity predated my getting fired. Maybe getting fired accelerated it, but it did not start it. I can't give Soul Sanctuary that much credit. But what getting fired taught me, or allowed me the opportunity to learn, was the importance of healing and of healing in community. When I got fired, I was about to enter my final semester of my Master of Divinity, and it was assumed that in this final semester that I would be employed at a church so that the learning and the experience and the learning could go hand in hand. So I quickly had to jump from one church to another, and by open arms was accepted at Fort Garry Mennonite Brethren Church. Before being hired, while I was doing my homework on this church, I reached out to the youth and young adult pastor. She and I met over coffee. She had no idea who I was or why I wanted to talk. And within minutes of our conversation, and I mean minutes, she told me in full sincerity, "Andre, you need to see a therapist." She remains a very good friend. But that struck me. When a stranger can see the hurt and anger radiating off of you, directed at the church and the people who fired me, something is amiss, especially as I thought I was hiding it so well. So this youth and young adult pastor, Janessa, like I said, she became a coworker, then a friend, and now she's truly a best friend of mine. And in so many ways, she journeyed with me through my own healing. I was pissed. I was vengeful. Yet without saying these words, Janessa inferred to me this: create the church that Soul Sanctuary wasn't and isn't. During my time at Fort Garry MB, I continued to lead with my right arm, doing everything for the glory of a God who was beginning to look a lot different than the God I initially pledged allegiance to. And I did that until one day I couldn't. For whatever reason, theology and biblical studies have always fascinated me, and it still do. And somewhere along the way, I stopped believing. The God of the Bible, which I had poured years of education and vocation into, was no longer real. I allowed myself to admit for the first time to me that there is no God. And that was scary. From where I started, that was a massive jump. But where my life and studies brought me, it was simply the next step. Yet, I still had this cross tattoo on my arm. And if you remember when I got here and I would light the candles, it would be on full display. Was I going to keep working for the glory of a God I no longer believed in? I needed something that would do two things. First, cover this thick black ink. And two, have some meaning. So I opted for this tree. If you look closely, which you can't from where you are, the lines of the cross are still quite discernible. In the world of tattooing, there is just no covering a thick black tattoo perfectly. But if you look again, as I do every day, the branches of the tree extend from the structure of the cross, which is poetic for who I am now. I can't erase my involvement in Christian churches. I can't erase the fact that I led young people to accept a Christian faith I no longer believe. But in many ways, I don't want to erase these things. Who I am now has grown from my experiences. The past decade of my life was in so many ways formed by my involvement in Christian ministry. Sure, I don't want to get fired again, but there's a lot I wouldn't change. Willow Lake taught me to lead with love and grace. Soul Sanctuary solidified that who I am is far more important than anything I can teach or know. And Fort Garry MB Church taught me how to seek wholeness from my hurt, not on my own, but with people I can trust. At every single one of these churches, I was led by my visible commitment to the message of Christianity, even when my internal convictions did not match this external facade. My first Sunday where I was not involved in church ministry was September 17th of 2023. Nicole and I, we went for breakfast. We sat at Seine River Cafe, embracing our heathenry. Yet something still felt off. I spent my life committed to the church and believing in its mission and being a part of something and believing in the myriad of benefits that being part of a church brings. So we started searching for alternatives. Unitarian churches are high on the Google search list of socially liberal churches. So we looked into First UU here and really never looked back. In one of my first conversations with Reverend Stephen here, he described Unitarian Universalism as a place for, quote, recovering Christians and Catholics, among other things. As I think about that, I think of the word recovering through the lens of a parable Jesus taught. Just can't get out of that world. But of separating the wheat from the chaff, separating the good from the bad and the useful from the useless. And it's been in the process of looking back that I am able to separate the good from the bad and say with confidence that I am only who I am now because of the roles I have played in the past, none of which I would change. Now I believe Kelly Seifert is going to lead our song of response.